Greetings fellow noobs. It's been more than 2 years since I've gotten my first frame. So I'm making another account review to keep you updated, but it's only right if I do it after getting 2 more frames in a row. And I did just that. I think, at this point my account is at the level where I can get Emperor fairly easily. Though it's not quite legend level yet. Before I'm going through my builds. First, you have to understand I don't play this game normally, so there will be context for each hero. Every single unit is tailored to either synergize with other units, cheese certain units, or both. So, if you are here looking for a guide or benchmark of some sort, I'm sorry, but this is not an account you should use as your guideline. There are 2 reasons why I'm doing these builds, drafts and cheeses. 1. I'm missing a lot of tank down options. This puts me in a bad situation playing turn 2 due to how strong openers are these days. 2. My top speed is 281, which means I can't play turn 2 and I also can't race to play turn 1. With that out of the way, let's start with our neutral picks. Neutral picks are units that you use to size up your opponent without showing your cards in first and second slots. You want heroes that are flexible, can play with and into any kind of team and doesn't have a clear weakness. Starting with my highest priority, Wet Flan. I don't think I need to explain why she's good. We all know how broken she is. The weird thing you might notice about my Wet Flan is, it has 281 speed. There's a reason for this, and that's bridging. With this much speed I can cut openers with Zeo's help and bridge my other units to gain the upper hand before the opponent can move. This is basically the basis of all my cheese whenever Wet Flan is open. The second highest priority is the Lord, the Savior, Mortalix. You see, I hate counters, I hate people winning by praying, and I hate getting punished by a whole team just because I touched something. So, I just first or second pick Mort every time. I don't care if they haven't picked counter. There are 2 things I have to address about my build. Artifact and speed. Bastion of Pelusia gives barrier and immunity to backline. This allows me to play various strat and units later down the line. I can buff stack with stealth units, play damage limit heroes, ignores 1 strip heroes like Sage Bal when I'm cleaving, and tons more. As for his speed, my main playstyle is cleave aggro, so I build him with enough speed to follow up after my cleave is done. Ideally he should be 240, but I don't have the gear to do that. And lastly, Luna. Once more, you might notice the speed. I built her slow to go after fast cleansers. This fact alone can throw the opponent's timings off. I'm using Etika so she isn't useless into Bellion and teams. This way she can also function as DPS when situation calls for it. And well, it's Luna, she does Luna things. If you've been watching my clips, you will notice that I cleave and aggro a lot. These neutral picks are great because they don't telegraph to the opponent that I'm cleaving. And if I don't see cleave to be possible, I can just pivot to other things. On the topic of cleave aggro, there's only one possible choice for me to 3p, Zeo. Despite being a cleaver, I'm really slow, with 281 Wet Flan being my fastest unit. So, the only way for me to win turn 1 is by using Zeo. Not just that, with Zeo 3, I can also ignore Harsetti pick from the opponent. As for his stats, I'm running an effectiveness Zeo since my follow-ups need him to land his strip and debuffs to work. Some people might think 260 is too slow for him. But to be honest, it doesn't really matter. In high rank everyone expects everybody to have proper builds. Only those who have crazy speed gears will try to contest Zeo. You can barely find those people once in 100 games. By this point, you will see a bunch of counter picks from the opponent. Which brings us to our last picks, 4th and 5th slots. Ludwig, probably the strongest raw damage cleave unit in the game. There's nothing special on my Ludwig, it's a pretty standard stat line. What makes Ludwig really good here is his synergy with Wet Flan and Zeo. Since Soul Burn grant him 20% CR push, I can ignore Politis or Ufine and still cuts the opponent's contester using Wet Flan's Soul Burn S3 to push him. This cheese alone has won me hundreds of games because it turns force ban Politis or Ufine into a dead pick. Teiyu, this hero is the savior of my draft. There's only so many Zio follow-ups in the game that doesn't get cooked by Politis, Ufine and Bellion. And only a few can synergize with Ludwig on top of that. Teiyu just answered those problems for me single-handedly. This thing is a god tier last pick for my draft. Let him free and he'd nuke something turn 1 and defense break the whole team. Ban him and my main cleave team goes through. He's just the perfect last pick. As for his stats, 172 speed so I can ignore Politis or Ufine. Some effectiveness so I don't have to rely too much on book against Bellion and the rest goes to damage. For his artifact, I'm using Zaark's artifact. This will allow him to be Wet Flan's replacement as Ludwig Bridge using double soul burn from Teiyu and Zio to push him up while still getting enough souls to soul burn Ludwig for attack buff. Jacko, she's usually picked when the opponent has little to no mitigation. She's neat because she doesn't rely on souls to function while also acting as a bridge for others. Her stats are pretty standard as far as her build goes. Nothing too special. Ufine, my village terminator. At first I was at lost on how to use her because she's basically just Jacko with steeper stat lines. Then it dawned on me. What if I make her a 0-speed ultra nuker to deal with Harsetti? So I did. This thing can even nuke a POVBMH easily and bridge using Glutton. To top it off, her S2 has crazy value ignoring setup. As for her stats, it's basically Banshee 13 Ufine with Destro and Pen sets. Ludica, my Ludica is pretty standard, bad even with only 100-ish effectiveness. I usually use her against drafts where Wet Flan is heavily counted and CR push isn't an option. Or against heroes that rely on buff to function like Shu and Solitaria. Roana, again pretty damn bad. I just slap whatever on her. She's neat against Amiki, Zio traps and other aggro cleave drafts. Loser Charles, this is my 0 RNG cleave finisher. Sometimes you just meet people who screw up the drafts and it doesn't matter who they ban. This hero can follow up after Ludwig, Teiyu or Flan nuke. Something to clean up what's left on the opposite side to seal the deal. For that, he doesn't need much speed since my whole plan to use him revolves around his 50% CR push. Just Destro Torrent with as much damage as possible with a little bit of bulk. And that's it for my cleave comp. Here's what my cleave draft looks like when I'm using them. First slot is neutral follow-up. Second is anchor. Third is obviously Zio. Fourth and fifth are force ban follow-ups. As you can see, with Wet Flan and Mort on my neutrals, I don't telegraph that I'm going to play cleave. This lets me freely pick Zio 3 since it'd be too late for them to contest him with speed imprints or use Zio trap. I double down on this mind game by pre-banning young Senya, essentially fake telegraphing that I want to pick Harsetti while stopping Albedo from getting picked early, making it easier for me to punch through with raw damage. This is how the draft would look like in an ideal situation. If this goes through, odds are I already win the match. Let's move to Anti-cleave. You can usually spot cleavers from their pre-bans and first pick. I usually still pick Wet Flan first. But for my second slot we'll go with Politis. Picking Politis erases a lot of options for cleavers to play while also denying them from using her. For her stats, I'm going Bruiser build with Book so she can stay on the field even after eating 1 or 2 attacks. For my ban protection, my choice for Anti-cleave is a Chates. This hero has cheesed so many cleavers single-handedly. 270 speed and eaterness to cut everything after the opener goes. From there, I can S2 to push someone by 60%. Or S1 to duel with Wet Flan to push her up and kill 2 units. This hero is the basis of most of my anti-cleave cheese. For the last picks, there isn't really a set of heroes for this as it is really flexible depending on what the opponent drafts. But there are 2 units I use extensively here. Caesarea, This unit used to be my neutral pick early season. But since I'm the only one doing it, my victims would know it's me after some time and started to snipe my heroes. So I nerfed her stats a bit and only use her for anti-cleave. With her bombs, Caesarea can deal with Amiki and BBK, making her a really good pick when immortal heroes are played. Not to mention, with her free SBS1, she has ultra synergy with Wet Flan. I made her with no attack and just focused on being bulky with a lot effectiveness. There are too many unknown variable that can kill her like counter. So it's better to be able to brush off some unlucky RNG for me. Ida. This hero's synergy with Achates is just crazy. She can get 80% push using Achates S2, making it virtually impossible to cut her once Achates moves. Her S2 and S3 are self-setup control and bridge with enough damage to wipe cleavers out. I built her with just enough bulk and immunity to survive any non-DPS openers like Luna and a bit of effectiveness for that strip, pushback and stun. Sometimes I also use Broman when the opponent has a lot of pushbacks in the draft. This makes it hard for them to use their skill and protects my Achates at the same time. His stats doesn't really matter, so I just put whatever and some speed. For a similar reason, T-Crozet is in this role with Speed Hillig build. He is usually used against Zio and Ludwig III since Broman doesn't have enough push to cut him. By putting Achates in the backline, no matter what Zio does, I'd still snatch the turn from Ludwig and just kill everyone with my CR push. His stats also doesn't really matter for this purpose aside from speed, so I just put whatever on him. Moon Bunny. This thing is my tank down option for anti-cleave. She stops Tomica from doing S2, Veronica's defense break and BBK S1. I'm running her on POV and protection set since I just need her to stay alive and be as annoying as long as possible. I rarely tank down against cleavers, but when I do, she's my go-to. The draft would usually look like this. First slot Wet Flan, second slot Politis, third slot Achates, fourth and fifth slot Flex Picks. Obviously, this isn't always true and sometimes I can decide to tank down depending on how the opponent drafts. But around 70% of the times, this is what I use against cleavers. The reason why I keep Wet Flan as first pick is, she's too troublesome in the hands of cleavers. She basically makes it impossible to trap the openers since she gives an extra option for them. If she's taken, I'd have to play defensively, which isn't ideal because I'm missing a lot of tank down options. By taking her, not only I deny her from the opponent, she also allows me to play offensively against cleavers despite losing turn 1. That is all for my anti-cleave cheese. Let's move to my favorite section, the villagers. What is a villager, you ask? Villagers are units who were built with 0 speed to fight with or against Harsetti. Solitaria. I usually ban protect this hero whenever Wet Flan is taken and the opponent locks Harsetti on 3. Solitaria stops focus, which means no duel from Wet Flan. But of course, since this hero relies on her unique buff to work, she's generally pretty bad against Harsetti because she has unbuffable in her kit. To counter that, I built mine with quite a bit of resistance and as much bulk as possible to take the beating. As for her artifact, I like using Syra Ren since it has sleep, which means it wouldn't overlap with her stun. This hero is just so toxic to play and I love it. Wet Ida. This hero has crazy value against Harsetti. Since Harsetti has a forced AoE whenever she attacks, Wet Ida can activate her passive easily. On top of that, she doesn't care about debuffs since she cleanses everything when her turn comes. I'm running book on her, which enables her to reverse her skill to S2 into S3, which in turn allows her to become a DPS by capitalizing on her defense break. By doing this, she's essentially a setup support, DPS and turn fixer all in one. For her stats, I'm running Destro immunity with a bit of bulk so she can take some hits in case I get a bad RNG for turn order and a little bit of effectiveness for her debuffs. She's running immunity so she wouldn't get defense broken or pushback easily. Ambitious Taiwan. At first I thought it'd be funny to run him on DPS build 3F with protection set. But this thing turns out to be stronger than I thought. Just like Wet Eater, he fulfills multiple roles in the team. Protection, cleanse, setup and DPS. Against no mitigation, he can do 10k with his S1 after defense break, which makes him pretty good for this. His stats is pretty standard aside from the criticals. I put a bit of resistance to prevent annoying debuffs from DPS, he's pretty cool to use. RB. He's just nice against zero mitigation villagers. I built him with immunity, a bit of bulk and the rest went to damage. You might be wondering why I would put bulk and immunity if it's for villagers. That's because the standard procedure in dealing with RB is to nuke him first turn using Harsetti. Since no one can push on her turn, if the turn order is bad the opponent can just nuke him again before he takes a turn. Immunity prevents def break from landing, which severely lowers the bulk needed to survive Harsetti. This guarantees RB to at least take a turn to nuke if not two. As for his artifact, obviously there's only one choice for a throwaway RB. Alexa's bread, and that's it for my villagers. I can't really show the draft process on this since each one of them are highly situational. I might not even use one of them against Harsetti depending on how the draft goes. But they're neat to have and has saved my skin bunch of times. With that covered, let's move to our last section. The flex picks. These picks are what makes or breaks the team. Just as the name suggests, they're flexible and can slot to any of the teams above anytime, anywhere. Flex picks are essentially the answers to the problems presented by the opponent drafts. Fail your flex picks, and your core team will also fail. Let's start with the mitigations. Crow, using Adamant. This hero is probably the best non-specific mitigation currently alongside Albedo. He's great as neutral pick and can act as a nuke anchor with his S3. I usually draft this hero when the opponent decides to tank down early, since it'd be hard to punch through extreme tank down like I mentioned. I usually play the long game with them and Crow is just a great hero for that. I'm not running protection set on him so I can play Wet Eater effectively. With his mitigation and stealth from Wet Eater, Harsetti can't break that barrier no matter how strong she is, which means I can't use her S2 if I play him on protection set. His stats are pretty standard for Crow, just bulk and some resistance and some speed. LRK, he fulfills a similar role to Crow but with protection set. I usually draft him when I'm playing stealth DPS or heroes that wants immunity. His stats is also pretty standard, nothing to comment on there. Those two are pretty much my only mitigation units. Next we'll talk about what I'd call RF Seekers. Resistance stacking was really popular last season and probably would be even stronger next season. To fight that I prepared 2 giga effectiveness units that would go under their radars. First one is DDR. DDR these days are usually built with low effectiveness to be more flexible for early pick. I capitalized on that fact and built mine with tons of effectiveness to debuff them. I don't know how to play DDR early anyways, so I figured I should just do this and keep him for 4th and 5th picks. Since the whole point of team is to make heroes like DDR a dead pick, most of the times he would get through and just win the game single-handedly. I put Rod on him for burst heal since these players usually tries to burst the threat first turn. It makes for a nice emotional damage seeing them put everything into one hero and I just heal it back to full. As for his stats, he's on immunity and a bunch of effectiveness. Ideally he'd have more HP and lower defense but I just can't be bothered with that. My second secret weapon that I never showed is Pyrrha. This unit has 100% win rate against resistance players last season. Nobody expects a 300% effectiveness Pyrrha after all. What makes her really good is, she put both unbuffable and restrict, both of which are highly detrimental to her team, since their choice of units are usually Elanav, Bellion and Shu. Shu relies on her unique buff to do anything, stopping that makes her a dead unit. Bellion without her random and defense buffs is much easier to kill. Elanav with restrict isn't even a unit. To top that off, she also acts as mitigation with her S3 and stunner in her off turn. Using Goblet of Oath, I can cycle the S2 faster, doing it all over again, essentially killing their tempo the whole game. And now, for the rest of my units. Eligos, I use him as both counter pick for Wet Flan or neutral pick when both my Luna and Wet Flan aren't available. This unit is nice since, contrary to popular belief, isn't really a cleaver only unit. He can slot in nicely as both setup and DPS in aggro team thanks to his anti-evasion and resource kit. My stats on him aren't that good. His CC isn't even maxed and he's slow as dirt. But he does his job. Celine, she's really good against raw damage cleavers and ultra aggro team. I built her with resistance since I want her to act as necromancer anchor. Not a solo DPS. She slots in nicely with my Bastion Mort, which makes her hard to kill and control. People will say that's bad because Mort disables counter. But like I said, I want her to be a necromancer anchor. I don't need her to counter to win. She won me so many games last season. Still my favorite unit to this day. Really good and fun unit to use. Tori, I'm running lifesteal set on her since I want her to be able to solo leftovers. With the way I play, I can usually burst down 1 or 2 units first turn. Having Tori on lifesteal allows me to solo whatever is left without having to worry about them chipping me down. Stat-wise, it's not that good. Too much wasted stats, but she does her job. As for her artifact, I like using RNL. It's just such a troll and match turning artifact, I can't help but laugh whenever it procs. The amount of time I got out of DDR sleep with this is just too much. See Phantom Politis. I actually hate using this unit. Whenever I draft her, it feels like I'm lacking damage to do anything. So I keep her as counter pick against resources teams. Since I can't contest with my speed anyways, I build her slow with lots of bulk and resistance. She's pretty nice to have, not a fan of her though. Karina, I've been using this unit to fight Taurus since she's been giving me headache along with Aris. She's also nice to use as anti-cleave. Stat-wise it's pretty standard, nothing special to mention about that. Bellion, I'm running 0 speed counter 3F on resistance build. She's just there against occasional cleavers who don't ban her and acts as force ban. She's also not bad into villager with this build and does tons of damage with 3F. I mean, it's Bellion with 3F. You've seen plenty of her, there's nothing to add on. Briar Iceria, this unit is a nice force ban against RB and occasional tank down BMH. I'm still running my old effectiveness speed DPS build with guiding light. I don't use her that much, but when she does she wins the game. BBK, I'm running her on full damage with immunity. I don't like running resistance on her since everything is just so thick these days, even this barely kills sometimes. You might be wondering about the Tori's artifact on her since barrier isn't really useful when she already has immortality. I'm using it for independent buff stacking to protect the immunity. This way I can just slam her when the situation calls for it without wasting another slot to draft a knight to buff stack her. Joshua, I'm also running him on immunity so I don't have to babysit him through everything. I built him with fairly low speed since I hate playing him above 170 speed. Every time I play him fast the opponent would just ignore him and he would outspeed the AoE attack and the opponent would just kill him after he procced since he couldn't lap back. By playing him slow, not only I guarantee his proc, I can also jail the opponent's skills by taking their units hostage. I gave him more attack than crit to do as much damage through miss and splash. Amiki, let's not talk about this. Okay fine, I'll admit it, I was too lazy looking for her gear. I just slap whatever I have with the highest attack on her. I hate praying to counter to win so I don't use that set. Her stats might look comical, but that 6k attack is no joke in the field. It blows up everything, you know what they said. If it ain't broken don't fix it. Kairon, he's useful to have as anti-cleave. There aren't a lot of games where I can use him. But when the draft is just right, he can single-handedly win me the game. I didn't do the last awakening since it increases his speed and I want him to be as slow as possible. Other than that, it's a pretty standard Chiron. The stats aren't that optimized, but he does his job. Shoo. This unit saved standard for me. I usually lock her on 3 to act as my solo DPS. She's just way too strong against standard and tank down. She's the only reason I would even consider playing turn 2 drafts. Her stats are also pretty standard. Nothing special about her build. Deliberate. I'm actually quite proud of her build minus the immunity. She's really good into Harsetti and to stop things like DDR whenever I'm playing aggro. Aside from her pretty bonker gears, it's just a standard deliberate. Abyssal Ufine. I used to use her a lot for anti-cleave. But I just find Politis for that job since I'm playing offensively. So she's kinda benched for the most part. I'm thinking of changing her into Destro or Protection set later with 0 speed. This build is obsolete for my playstyle, so I'm scrapping it after I get the gears sorted out. Celine. I used to run 240 speed build to make sure she cuts everything. But I just don't use her that much and she was holding my best gears. So I nerfed her and just use standard build with tons of damage currently. The lost amputee from another world. I was going to make a full damage ed for anti-cleave. But everything these days either has stealth, too thick, or has some mechanic to stay alive. So I scrapped that idea and went back to injury build. He's still holding some of the full damage crit pieces, so his HP is a bit low. But he's working fine enough as is, so I'm a bit lazy to change his gears. Running Sigurd since Golden Rose just doesn't lifesteal enough, especially at plus 15. Lionheart Samir. She's at 0 speed resistance build. I don't use her that much, but she's neat against debuffers team with low damage like Solitaria. She has tons of bulk, so she can just wait out her turn to come. This also allows me to play her into villages. Ning Ning. I usually use her in my cleave team to kill Tori or to ignore BMH. Her stats is a bit all over the place since she doesn't really need anything but correct speed tuning to function. As for her artifact, I use Young Senyas for that double push with her free turn to frontline to get as much as I can on first turn. She's a neat option to have that got me out of hard drafts quite a lot of times. Sharani. I bring her to fight Mort, DDR and Harsetti sometimes. She's nice when I want to play a bit aggressive but not too fast. I just slap my leftover things on her that have bulk in it along with some effectiveness, resistance and immunity. As for her artifact, she's using Green Sharon artifact for a bit more effectiveness and cycling. Veronica. I build mine a bit thick and slow, since I never contest speed anyways. Other than that, I just use her to counter immortals like others. Schnitzel. He's just a DDR counter. Not a huge fan of using him, but he's nice to have when the situation calls for it. I also slap whatever on this guy. He doesn't need good stats to do his job. For his artifact, I'm running Idol's Cheer since people always try to bring him down first for the DDR. So might as well get as much as I can by cycling my DPS through him. And that is all the units I built for PvP. I'm not going through the others since they're just PvE units who don't even hold permanent gears since I'm switching them around a lot. While the rest are not built. As you can see, the builds are pretty subpar as far as Emperor account goes. But these are more than enough to get Emperor comfortably. Last season 1 didn't even play on the last 3 days because I was so far up the cutoff. These cheese builds that I do gets better the higher the rank is. Because you can expect everyone to play optimally in high rank, picking the right counters which makes them predictable. The cheeses essentially turn right answers into wrong answers. There are 3 things I want to say before ending this video. You can take it as advice if you want or just a rambling of mine. First, you shouldn't focus too much on what you don't have. Try to work with what you have instead. People seem to be really fixated on not having 320 speed gears or certain units to compete. Secondly, there are more than one ways to build a unit. Stop thinking so one-dimensionally and that a unit need to reach a certain standard stat to work. Your build just need to have a purpose to work, have a clear idea on how you want to use them rather than following others. Third, as I've mentioned before, do not use this account review as a guide or benchmark to build your units. Chasing meta requires you to have some extremely skewed stats after all. You don't want to use these weird stats on your units if you are playing normally. That is all. Thanks for watching.